This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, hello there. Jeff Cardano welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, July the 15th, we're halfway through July, I guess. Well, actually, the 16th is. One of the best finals of all time. The last World Cup final, the most recent World Cup final happened. And that was 2018 when France took down Croatia 4-2. This was the 21st FIFA World Cup and the first time it held in Russia. A lot of people said Russia kind of bought their way into this thing like the Olympics in 2014. The Winter Olympics in 2014, yeah. Anyway, this was the first time Eastern Europe hosted the World Cup. It was $14 billion in cost. Jeez. So 32 teams came in as Russia qualified automatically and everyone else played. Of the 32 teams in the 2018 tournament, 20 were returning from the 2014 event, while Iceland and Panama were making their first appearances of the World Cup, which was amazing. You know, Iceland with that great run in Euros before France crushed them in the quarters, and Panama coming through because the Americans choked an opportunity to beat Trinidad and Tobago or even tie Trinidad. They would have had a chance to qualify for the tournament through intercontinental playoffs. But yeah, the Americans really choked all that. As you can guess, well, we'll get to the final later on. The Golden Boot went to Harry Kane, who scored 6 goals in the tournament, which was pretty good. So yeah, a lot of people were not happy with the Russia thing. Portugal and Spain were trying to have a joint bid. I don't know why. I mean, why would you make it both? I mean, Portugal could host the World Cup on its own. Spain could host the World Cup on their own. Why did they share? So there were only 4 bids for the 2018 World Cup. Portugal and Spain had a joint bid. Belgium and Holland had a joint bid, kind of like winning Euro 2000 when they did that. And England did. But England only got 2 votes in the first round and were eliminated. Wow. There were a lot of criticism because of the Russian bribery and all that. So anyway, there were a lot of qualifications and all that. There were a lot of teams that actually couldn't qualify. Italy, who were the 4-time World Cup champions, actually missed for the first time since 1958, which was shocking and all that. They lost to Sweden in a qualification playoff. Holland, who took third place in 2014, were shockingly knocked out in the preliminary rounds in the qualifying 2. Cameroon missed, Chile missed, New Zealand missed, and the Americans missed. 4 reigning continental champions missed. Who knew? They said it was the first time that 3 Nordic countries and 4 Arab nations would qualify for the World Cup. The Nordics were Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden. Arabs were Egypt, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and Tunisia. Who knew? Who cares? So anyway, the 8 groups were as follows. Group A saw Uruguay, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt take each other on. And the host Russians were great against Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the 2 Arab countries. However, Uruguay stopped them in the final game. So basically, that was for first place. Uruguay and Russia easily won. There were no ties in Group A. Saudi Arabia beat Egypt, and Saudi Arabia rarely won in competitions in the World Cup. All that. Group B, Spain was with Portugal, Iran, and Morocco. So basically, it was weird how Portugal and Spain, major neighbors, would face each other. We kind of expected a tie, and we did see a tie, but CR7 had to score a hat trick for Portugal to tie Spain and all that. Portugal would go on to beat Morocco, but not Iran. They tied Iran. Spain and Portugal both got through with 5 points. Iran had 4, Morocco had 1. Group C saw France and Denmark qualify at the expense of Peru and Australia. So yeah, Denmark looks good. Kasper Schmeichel and all that. This was his first major tournament. Group D saw Croatia and Argentina get in, with Nigeria and Iceland not getting in. So Croatia won against everybody, even Argentina, which was amazing. Well, that 3-0 crushing of Argentina was huge. Argentina got lucky they got in because, well, they tied Iceland, but they beat Nigeria. They needed this one. Iceland couldn't beat Croatia. Group B saw Brazil and Switzerland qualify. Brazil only gave up 1 goal. That was to Switzerland in their tie with Switzerland. They beat Serbia and Costa Rica. Costa Rica this time around were not as good as they were in 2014, but I guess the climate changed. Group F saw a massive shock. Well, Sweden, Mexico, Korea, and Germany were all in the same group. And everyone thought it was going to be Germany and probably Mexico. But the defending World Cup champs laid an egg in the first game against Mexico, losing 1-0. They beat Sweden on a injury time goal against scored by Tony Kroos. But then Korea shocked Germany with 2 late goals. Meanwhile, Sweden beat Mexico 3-0 and shocked themselves by getting into the tournament. Sweden and Mexico both with 6 points. Korea and Germany with 3. That was shocking. Sweden was the team that knocked Italy out of the World Cup. And all that. I mean, we'll try not even qualifying. Group G, England was with Belgium, Tunisia, and Panama. And a lot of people figured that it was going to be Belgium and England. And they were right. Belgium beat England the final game 1-0. Tunisia did beat Panama to at least get something right. Group H saw Colombia, Japan, Senegal, and Poland face each other. It was going to probably be Colombia, and then second place would be down to the wire. And it was down to the wire. Colombia won their group. They lost to Japan in the first game, but they beat Senegal and Poland. Poor Poland, I feel bad for them. Poland did beat Japan, and Colombia beat Senegal. But the worst part was, in Group H, that Japan and Senegal, the tiebreaker. They both were 1-1-1. They both scored 4 goals. They both gave up 4 goals, so goal differential didn't mean anything. They tied each other 2-2. So FIFA made another tiebreaker, fair play points. Basically, if you got a yellow card or a red card, that adds points against you. You don't want, just like golf, you don't want to score as many points. So thanks to the fair play points, Japan beat Senegal, which was shocking. Meanwhile, they went to the knockout stage. France and Argentina were first, and it was a classic. The first round of 16 game was huge. It was back and forth, 7 goals. France would win 4-3 against Argentina. Di Maria, Mercado, and Aguero scored for Argentina, but France canceled out. Griezmann with 1, Pavard with 1, and Mbappe with 2. Uruguay would shock a lot of people by beating Portugal 2-1 later on June 30th. So it would be Uruguay versus France in the quarterfinals. Not Argentina Portugal, like everyone said. It was going to be Messi versus CR7. Nope, both of them fell flat. On Canada Day, Spain took on Russia. It was 1-1 after extra time. Spain got their goal on an own goal by Russia, but then Russia got a penalty and they scored. The game went to, ironically, penalties. And Spain missed 2 of them. Koke and Aspas both got their shots saved by... his name escapes me. Who's that great Russian goalkeeper? Akitafev. So anyway, that happened. And Croatia and Denmark, they both scored within 4 minutes. Mandzukic and Jurgensen, respectively. But then nothing happened, and they went to penalties. Croatia would miss 2 penalties, but Denmark would miss the final 2 of theirs, and Croatia would move on to the quarterfinals. Against Brazil, well, they would face Brazil. As Brazil took care of Mexico 2-0, it was easy to see. Belgium took on Japan, and it was a classic. Croatia would take on Russia. Yeah, that makes sense. Brazil would take on Belgium in the quarterfinals, as they beat Japan 3-2. Japan had a 2-0 lead, and they choked it. For Horgan, Fellini, and Chadley scored. It was shocking to see Japan have such a good lead, and then they choked it. But Belgium's golden generation helped out. Sweden would beat Switzerland 1-0 on a goal by Forsberg. It was nice to see Sweden on a goal by a soccer player, not Forsberg, not a hockey player. And then Colombia and England played each other. Kane scored on a penalty to make it 1-0, and we were thinking, yes. And then Colombia, late in injury time, Mina. It's like, damn it. I remember going to Communitech to watch this game with Bill, my buddy, who basically had a foot in the door in Communitech. So then it went to penalties, and I'm thinking, fuck, penalties, we're going to suck. The third one was missed by Henderson. It was 3-2 after 3 sets of penalty kicks for Colombia. But Uribe got saved by Pickford, and then Trippier scored. And then after Pickford saved another penalty, it was up to Dyer, Dier, and he scored, and England won on penalties, which was shocking. They rarely do. So anyway, England went to the quarterfinals. The first quarterfinal was Uruguay versus France, and France easily won 2-0. Varane and Griezmann. Belgium shocked Brazil, in my mind, because Brazil usually is always good. 2-1 on goals by Fernandinho. Well, an own goal by Brazil, and then Kevin De Bruyne. Brazil countered with one late, but too little too late. England easily beat Sweden 2-0. I don't think I was worried about Sweden at all. Anyway, Harry Maguire and Dele Alli scored for England. In the fourth quarterfinal, Russia took on Croatia, trying to have a Russia-England feel to it. Russia trying to get into the semis as a host nation. Russia scored first on a goal by Cheryshev, whereas Kramaric made it 1-1. In extra time, Vida scored for Croatia to make it 2-1, but Bruno Fernandes for Russia tied it at 2. Then went to penalties. So Russia had to go through penalties for the second straight time, as did Croatia. But unfortunately, Smolov and Fernandes basically missed. So Fernandes went from hero to GOAT, and Croatia only missed one penalty on their way to the semifinal. France would take on Belgium in the first semifinal and won 1-0. Uriti. Croatia and England played a tough game. Kieran Trippier scored early in the 5th minute to make it 1-0 for England, and we were like, yes. And then out of nowhere, Perisic tied it at 1, and then in extra time, Mandzukic made it 2-1. England obviously didn't want to play for third place, and they showed, losing to Belgium 2-0. But then the final happened. It was a great final, as France would take advantage of a Mandzukic own goal to make it 1-0. Then Croatia made it 2-1 on a goal by Perisic. Griezmann would score on a penalty to make it 2-1. Pogba and Mbappe would come in to make it 4-1 France. Croatia scored late on a Mandzukic goal, but France won 4-2. Getting their first World Cup in 2 decades. Ironically enough, France and Croatia met in the 98 World Cup knockout stage in the semifinals, which France won 1-0. Harry Kane scored 6 goals, giving him the Golden Boot, which was great and all that. There were actually 12 own goals. I think that was a new FA Cup a new World Cup record. But yeah, it was hard to believe. But yeah, Russia had some controversies. But the weird thing is that they put on a good World Cup. So gotta give it to them. I won't give props to Qatar. I don't think I can. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.